Rebecca, do you have anything to add about that kindness?
One of the things that we've kind of discovered in being here as a team is to kind of two things to keep in mind is you're going to be spending a good amount of time with your coworkers, and I have to say that part of why this conference experience has been so positive for me is because we've had a great time here as a team. And I don't mean a great time socially, I mean that we have been very respectful of each other in terms of what people needed for togetherness time and alone time. So I think it's really important to also have that in mind in your conference planning and think about, especially if you're attending as a team, don't place too many extra obligations on your team members. Like somebody may not want to join for a group dinner after having been with groups for like 10 hours straight, and so leaving people that space to just say, my need is I need some quiet alone time tonight, so I'm just going to stay here and you guys can go have dinner or whatever, and everybody's good with that. And I guess I would just ask everybody to think really about their team members and just having that respect for what other people need and feeling okay about stating your own need in that regard. Like, I'm good with what I saw for today, and now I'm ready to be by myself.
Yes, absolutely. And I also would, to add to that, I would say be clear on expectations. If there is events that you expect your team to show up for or to be ready for, don't kind of spring it on them the day of. Make sure that you guys talk about it. Like, oh, the program paid to go, or paid tickets for this extra event after the conference. This is something that we want to do, or maybe we want to buy tickets for this event. How do you feel about that? Also, like, if you have expectations of like the types of sessions that you want people to go to, be clear about it. Talk to your team. It's like, hey, there's this really big focus, for example, like digital literacy. Can we try to hit as many digital literacy that we would want? Or maybe it's like we've noticed that let's say, for example, our students are struggling in certain types of math classes maybe, or that we're not seeing the results that we want. Maybe be clear with your team on like, maybe we should try to tackle this. But, talk to people. Don't just direct them necessarily so much as like have a conversation about what your program's goals are. Have program goals.
Well, and very closely to that, if you are listening to this from a program leadership point of view and you know that some members of your team are going to be able to go to this conference, but not every teacher in the program is not necessarily going to the conference, but you have an expectation of the people who are participating in the conference to come back and share that material in some way. Please be really upfront with that so that we all know the kinds of notes that we should be taking or what we're going to be planning to come back and share with the people who didn't attend the conference for whatever reason. If you are going to want presentations from your team members, for example, or you're going to want newsletter articles from your team members, it's really great when people know that in advance. Because the other thing is that one of the things I did find in this conference was people were just incredibly generous. The presenters were incredibly generous in sharing their resources with everybody. So you can gain so many resources by having your team members spread out in these different sessions. Thinking about how do you want to compile all that information and having a plan for that and letting your team members know what that plan is, very, very helpful for you to get the most out of the conference from a program point of view.
Yes, absolutely.
What we didn't talk about, though, is we actually planned on taking notes, too. We have a folder in our shared drive called COABE 2024. There's the spreadsheet that has the conference schedule that we all planned on, which we were flexible on. If we realized that we don't want to go to a session or maybe something else sounds good, we changed it. It wasn't a big deal, No one's getting punished here. We also had a folder for notes. So we put in those materials. If there was additional notes with the materials that the presenter shared, we typed them up. Rebecca, you wrote them down and you're going to type them up or take pictures later, whatever you want to do. And we're going to put them in the folder, and when we talk about the conference, we're going to talk about sessions that we found particularly meaningful, interesting, helpful, whatever. And we're able to see that, right? We're gonna be able to see that later. And another benefit of that conference app, by the way, is like they put the materials in the app.
Yes.
So that is also like something really cool that you can't get from a paper schedule. Here, we can download this. If we forgot to, copy it earlier, you can download it later. That's another thing. I kind of want to pivot a little bit to our focuses. We mentioned earlier the kind of, the themes or the topics that each one of us were interested in individually, which we all came up with on our own. No one said, Rebecca, go to IETs. Rebecca took that on herself. Jamie took on leadership on herself. I chose digital literacy and professional development by myself because those are our interests right now, and those are like the needs coming up, right? So what I want to talk about is just maybe like a couple sessions or 1 or 2 sessions from each of us that we found in those topics that we found particularly interesting, particularly useful. Okay, so are there any particular, sessions that you guys want to talk about?
There are a couple of sessions I really want to highlight, and both of them have to do with leadership. During the pre-conference session, I went to a session called Honoring Dignity to Improve Resiliency and Conflict Management Skills. It's actually one that Rebecca and I both attended together. And the presenter, Duran Thompson, did such an amazing job of not just presenting the material, and the material was incredible. The slides were very well done. The discussion was wonderful. There was a lot of interaction, and that's something that if you're ever considering being a presenter at any level, just to please keep that in mind. There was so much interaction, a lot of table discussion and then group discussion. There was writing exercises, reflection exercises, a lot of material sharing. That's definitely a session that I am going to be taking those skills, those tools, and putting them into practice immediately. The other one that I attended happened to be one that I attended today, and it was Educational Leadership 101. And for anyone that has ever been to COABE, there's a really good chance that you know who Jeff Abramowitz is. He's actually a member of the COABE board and has done a lot of presentations over the years with COABE. And again, really great material, great tools, a lot of great discussion. And one thing that Nadia, you and I had talked about today are some of these presenters, a lot of these presenters, were trying to stick with the conference theme, which was Together in Harmony, because Nashville is the music city. And that one was the case. He compared it to an orchestra. So he compared leadership to kind of being the conductor of the orchestra and just really made that relevant, made it relatable, easy to remember. So, those both really stuck out with me just because they were very engaging, a lot of great information and tools, things that I can just take with me immediately and use. So yeah, those were my top 2, I think, from the entire conference.
Okay, so what I want to talk about was there were 2 sessions as well that I went to. I mean, I went to a number of exceptional sessions, but there were 2 that I really want to share with y'all. One of them was a session that was a team from Michigan in a program level team, so like an ESL program. And they described how they created the workforce preparation activities class for an IET program for their ESL students. And they were very generous with their materials. They shared a lot of what they had done, and they had us as the participants reenact a couple of lessons out of this class. And what this was showing people was how to help your ESL learners who may have limited formal work experience in the United States do things in class that can then be presented in resume and interview language. And honestly, I was very, very, very impressed with the structure of their program. And as we go into planning our own IETs for New Mexico, if anybody is interested and wants to talk with me more about how they created this workforce preparation course. So they have the adult education is the ESL classes, the workforce preparation is helping students with their job skills, work readiness, communication, professionalism, those types of things. And then there's a workforce training component that's different. But if you're looking at that workforce preparation or the workplace preparation skills piece and you have questions, I would love to share this with you because it was very, very well done. The second one that I went to was a session that I went to this afternoon. And that session was put on by some presenters from Illinois. And that was a session talking about their professional development pathway for their data professionals. And what they've done there is they've actually developed a 4-course sequence to help their data professionals improve and increase their skills, raise up what they can do with their databases and stuff like that. Part of the reason I bring this to you is because I really, really do want to shout out to our data professional team in New Mexico. That's the committee that developed our data professional competencies, and that was a committee of the field. And I did brag about y'all a little bit when I was there, and people were so amazed to hear that that was something that New Mexico was doing, and they asked if we could share those competencies with them.
Whoa.
So awesome.
Yeah.
Shout out to New Mexico in so many different ways this year.
New Mexico is on the map thanks to Rebecca and Jamie.
Oh, can I tell you, just as a little bit of a segue, just this was our year. This was New Mexico's year. Not only was the Adult Learner of the Year from New Mexico, so just big kudos to Samuel Gabaldon, who was there the entire time. We had 2 other student ambassadors who attended the conference, and so that made 3 total students for us. We really never had students at the conference before. Also, New Mexico was highlighted during the state leadership meeting. Usually there's 3 or at the most 4 states that are highlighted. The COABE CEO, Sharon Bonney, along with I believe the executive board, decide which states to highlight. So it's by invitation only. We were invited to share. So Amber Gallup and I shared what we're doing with advocacy and professional development. That got a lot of people talking about New Mexico. So it's just our year. Not to mention the fact that New Mexico has we're one of the few states that now has a full-time executive director in the state association, which of course would be me. But that means that a lot of other state associations are looking at us as to how to make that work. So it's just been a great year.
And last but not least, Jamie Trujillo, our very own, has been elected to the COABE board.
Yeah,
so
we were not going to let that pass, but
yeah,
okay.
I was waiting for somebody else to say it. I didn't want to say it.
Yeah, so congratulations again. That's incredibly exciting. Not to mention, I saw so many of our people there. There's so many programs represented, and some programs brought a bunch of people.
Yes.
And I didn't even know that certain people were coming, and then to see them there was wonderful. It was just so great. There was so much of us, and it's always wonderful to see your own people too,
Yes.
We spent some good hallway time with some of our people.
So, I know we're talking a lot about people who've never been to this conference before, but guys, you guys brought it. We all brought it. This was our year for sure.
Excellent. Yes.
But we want to hear about Nadia's sessions before we wrap up.
Yes.
Well, thank you. Thank you for including me on this podcast. So, again, echoing Rebecca, there were so many really great sessions. I feel like I got a lot out of, but we do not have time for that. All right. So I want to highlight 2 really interesting sessions I attended. I attended one called A Pathway to Disability Inclusive Adult Education Programs. So what that session was about was really just finding these tools so that programs could better support their disabled learning differences student. So they talked about ADA compliance and also the limitations of ADA, which is the Americans with Disabilities Act, right? And just about, when I say the limitation, what I mean is that it really made me think about, if we just talk about accommodations, but now about that kind of universal design, it kind of puts the students in a place that they need extra. And I never thought about it in that way. And they actually played this really funny video about this scenario where, what if there was a town where everyone was in wheelchairs, right? And so everything, all societal, all buildings were shorter because people are in wheelchairs. Everything is accessible in that way. But then people who were not in wheelchairs started moving to the town, and they started making accommodations. Like maybe putting on helmets so that when they hit their heads on the low ceilings, they don't hurt as much. Or like finding stools, and what it did, it was in this absurdist kind of funny cartoon. It looked like it was from maybe the 80s or 90s. But the point is that when you're giving accommodations, you're constantly putting people in this place that they need special support rather than designing for everyone in mind. And I thought that was so interesting. And kind of what they talked about was like how to be inclusive without just constantly spotlighting people's disabilities. How to have a basic screening. They gave us a template of where students can sort of talk about challenges that they have. So it was kind of like a checklist. It was just so interesting in that way. And the biggest takeaway, honestly, was how many people in different programs in different states across the country have the same issues. We do not have tools or resources. So imagine so if those are people that are in that session and are highlighting that, imagine all the programs that couldn't go to COABE, that couldn't talk about this, that don't have the resources to find this information, that have to turn students away, or that students aren't given that chance to really have a conversation about needs. And, eventually we lose those students in one way or another. And we will definitely include some of these resources, just so like giving just basic sort of tools to really think about our practice, to really think about not just the classroom, really even intake and orientation, right? Because that's where we lose students too. So that was one thing that stood out to me, is like how this is such a huge problem in so many different places, even places with money, guys.
It really is.
Even states with money. And the other session that I really want to talk about is a toolkit for digital competencies. So as a state, we spent so much time, Rebecca highlighted the fantastic work that data professionals did to build data professional competencies. There was also, another team working at administrator competencies, working really hard on that. There was also instructor competencies that we worked on, that we are tweaking, that we're going to tweak in the years to come. But one thing that keeps coming to my brain and I keep worrying about is digital skills competencies, because that is a big topic. That is something that we worry about with our students. The thing that I found so fascinating about the session was that they had competencies for practitioners and they had competencies for students. Because if you're thinking of that, how can you expect a teacher, on top of everything else they have to do, right, to teach digital literacy or have digital literacy components in their lessons, but we're not taking into consideration what are the competencies of the instructor? What do the instructor or the admin or the support staff, what do they need to know to be able to provide the best possible services to our students, to be confident in their own abilities? How many times, I think the example that I've really thought of during this is imagine if you asked a group of people, can you use email? What does that mean? Everyone's going to say yes in some way, but what if it's something specific? Right. What skills, the skills needed to be able to effectively use an email account is more than just logging in and logging out. Because if you go into actual levels and competencies of digital skills of using email, there's so much. Accessing apps, Creating an email, sending it, creating a signature, scheduling, organizing the email. Like, these are just stuff. Attachments, attaching things.
Yep.
Right? There's so much components to that, and we don't always take that into consideration. And the competencies, they gave us all the competencies that they created. This took a really big effort. It was from Pennsylvania Adult Ed, right? So the Pennsylvania Professional Development created this. And they spent months on it and workshopped and communicated and determined what are the competencies of practitioners. And I see that in so many different ways. Like, you can go to a program and grab 3 random people, and they're going to have radically different tech needs and tech skills. So it's all in my mind, and my mind is still percolating, guys. I feel like this conference was so full, right? So full of knowledge, and there's stuff I'm going to be thinking about for weeks after we go home.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't just end at the conference, because we also, as a team, informally, we talked about sessions that we did. We talked about what we found to be effective presentations, maybe not so effective. We talked about programs that have millions of dollars and what they did, and how we could see what they did. Maybe there's some stuff we could take. There was so much we talked about and thought about. And I'm just thinking about ideas, just the ideas that are coming out of this later, I'm super ecstatic about that. That's the biggest thing, because now there's possibility. We're going to think about our practice. We're going to reflect on that. We're going to try some new ideas. And that is not just at the professional development level. That's going to be across the board. And that is, really what I think is one of the most incredible benefits of conference going, is that you're out of your silo. And we didn't talk about this earlier, but try not to do other work while you're at the conference if you can, because balancing that is really hard.
Very difficult.
We actually talked about it as a team before we went. We're we're going to focus as much as we can on the conference. If you can do that. I know that's not always feasible for everybody, but you're going to be in the space to really learn in a way that, and that goes for any conferences or teachers institutes, you're going to learn in a very different way than you would if you take an online course, than you would if you attend a webinar, than you would if you go to a 2-day training. This is so different, and professional learning needs those variables, needs those different types of learning, so that we have, the most of it, the variety.
Yes.
So I want to add one thing, Nadia, and it's a little bit of a shift in the conversation, but we are talking to the audience primarily of New Mexico adult education professionals, and all of you who are listening to us right now, we heard amazing things that other people in other states are doing, and I know that many of you are doing amazing things in your own classrooms and in your own programs. And Jamie pointed out that New Mexico had a lot of presence at the conference this year. The next level of presence for us is for us to see more New Mexico people submitting their presentations and having more New Mexico participants presenting the amazing work that you're doing in your program. And if you're nervous and you need coaching, reach out to the Propel team and we will help you out, I promise, okay? We can't guarantee to get you accepted, but we will definitely help you out with presentations.
Absolutely. Gladly.
Shameless plug for our own work.
No,
our service to
it's
ourselves.
not a shameless plug for our own work. It is a promotion of the quality projects that are taking place in our state.
Yes.
Absolutely. Just the few times I've talked about New Mexico stuff, again, informally, not even during sessions, I just ran into people and talked to them about what stuff that New Mexico is doing. People were like, whoa, really? Interesting. Or I want to learn more about that. And it was just a definite sense of pride. a sense of pride on what we could really bring and what people can learn from us.
I'm glad you both brought that up, because a big part of COABE, of MPAEA, anything that is outside of our state or inclusive of other states, we go there to learn from other people, to take what we can, but we also go there to give. New Mexico has a lot to give. So keep that in mind when you think maybe you don't have something to give. I guarantee you do. So really think about that. What do you have to give?
What an excellent note to end on. So I want to thank you both for taking this time for me on hardwood floors. Because there are not enough seats to really talk about this conference and just reflect and just appreciate. Thank you both so much for joining me today.
Yes, thank you, Nadia. Thank you, Rebecca. And thank you to everybody who attended and those who will be attending in the future.
And those who are listening to our conversation today.
Yes.
Yes. Items in Nadia's autism preparedness bag. A notebook for conference notes. A sketchbook for stress doodles. Colored pencils for colorful stress doodles. Fidget toys. Pencils in a pencil box. Chapstick. Glasses cloths. Notebook for internal thoughts. Emergency deodorant for anxiety sweats. Headphones. Laptop. Chapstick. Water bottle. Wallet because it's too bulky for my pockets. Keys because they're too jangly for my pockets. Presentation handouts I'll never read. A fun book. Rolade for stomach pains. Yet another chapstick. A serious book. A few maxi pads I keep forgetting to take out of my bag. Tissues. And business cards for networking. I used all of these items at least once during the COABE conference. A few people came up to me and asked if I just came from the airport. Nope, I'm just anxious and prepared for it. One thing we didn't get into on the benefits of going to conferences is all the informal networking opportunities. I started running into the same people over and over again as we go to the same themed presentations, and we can keep connecting and communicating before or after the presentations and just kind of continue the conversation. We also shared resources and connected through LinkedIn and our business cards. And I also had people come up to me because they liked my look. I have a partially shaved head and usually I'm wearing funky glasses. So I, had people come up to me and be like, oh, I love your glasses, or shaved head. I have a shaved head too. Love your look. And that was just kind of like an in to start a conversation. And it's just such a great opportunity you can't quite get just online or really other limited opportunities. So I'm incredibly grateful that I had this chance to really just meet people from different states and territories, and some even international, because I went to a conference. Going to this conference was such an experience. It was really fun. Recording this episode was really fun too. Through multiple takes and taking body breaks because we were sitting on the hardwood floors while we recorded this episode, it kind of brought us together as a team. Just opportunities to kind of laugh at each other and review what the benefits are of going to a conference. So it was just really great having these little opportunities to get to know my team better, to meet different people, and to just learn in such a different capacity. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you for listening.